And we're live. Welcome back to the LOOPcast. I'm joined by Josh and Erica. Thank you to everyone joining us in the live chat today. We got a fun show. We're going to get parliamentary with you guys. We had European elections go on and some shocking results, maybe a foreshadowing for America. We also have dueling mural defacements. One comes with a felony, one comes with encouragement. And then finally, we have some fun fact checks from the AP. But Josh, we kind of lost you a little bit. Therefore, we found you, though. I'm glad to have you locked and loaded for today's episode.
I mean, something's going on with the internet today, so who knows?
They don't want to hear you talk Parliament.
I know, I know. May the sacred heart intercede for me.
Yeah, shout out to EdStap3 just saying, have a good show with a praying hand emoji. Just love the support. Moral support from the chat, unrivaled. If you want to join Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 11 a.m., help out the show, leave us a review, leave a like on this. Appreciate it. But I say we get into it here.
Let's do it.
We had some pretty shocking elections. And no, not American elections yet. That's coming in November. But Europe voted all across. And they have such an interesting system. It's almost fun just to kind of dive into it because it's so foreign to the American brain. But some real messages were sent by Europeans all over. Erica, what was the main takeaway from what we saw from these elections?
Yeah, the main takeaway would be that populism is on the rise in Europe, and it was a resounding rejection of far left, not only social policies on issues like transgenderism, but also on economic policies, climate policies, a round rejection of a lot of these far left agenda items across Europe. And probably the most shocking was in France, and we'll get into that in just a second. But first, because very few Americans are aware of how this all works in Europe. So just a really quick, like Civics 101 European style, if I may, Pogo. Okay, so we've got, as you know, we have the national governments of like the German government, the French government, the Belgian government, and then we have the European Union, which is sort of the Uber government over all of Western Europe.
Which is like my worst nightmare.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the UN writ small in Europe, and it has real governing influence and political power in smaller countries that are a part of it. And I could go into that, but basically what happens in the EU elections, which is what we saw over the weekend, members of the European Parliament, so the main countries, they come together and they elect their representatives to go from France to the EU, or from Belgium to the EU, from Germany to the EU. These are held every 5 years, and they're contested in the local countries. So like in France, there's up-teen political parties. It's not like America where we have Republicans v. Democrats v. RFK. It's very split among different right-wing parties, left-wing parties. The elections are contested at the national level, and then all of those people who are elected go to the European Union, and they join parties there. There are 7 parties in the European Union. So yeah, this is it's very Byzantine in a way, right? And you're like, what is going on, Europe? But in a way, I'm kind of jealous because someone voting in France actually has more than just 2 options to vote for. Josh and I can probably tangle over this. I don't know, 2-party system versus 17-party system. What's good? But we have a good visual here. I don't know if we can pull that up, Simon, of what happened. Here we go. Yep. 2024 European election. And what you're seeing on the screen for those of you on YouTube are the shifts in power. And you'll see a shrinkage, particularly of the Green Party there, which you can imagine what their agenda is. I could go on and on. And you'll see some of the other leftist parties have shrunk. You'll see an expansion of what they are calling the far right parties in the red and the yellow. And nowhere was this more evident than in France with their EU elections. So France is far right. And this is language from the New York Times.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm seeing a little activist language.
Yeah. My lingo is a little colored. Anti-immigrant National Rally Party. I just love the name, the National Rally Party. Led by Marine Le Pen and Jordan Bardella, who's a 28-year-old prodigy of Le Pen. They surged to first place. There's no other way to describe it. They took 31.4% of the vote, which again, in a 2-party system doesn't sound like a lot, but for the French, that is a huge percentage of the vote. And Emmanuel Macron's Renaissance Party, another great name.
Great name.
And very telling. They were a distant second with just 14.6%, so less than half of what the right-wing party received. Why did this happen? Well, I could probably guess as someone who's more sympathetic with the right wing, but according to to European conservatives, analysts are still parsing through. Oh, this is Macron. Let me back up. So in response to this stunning blow to Macron's power in France, he decides to call basically like an emergency election of the French parliament. And this was shocking because that election wasn't supposed to happen for 3 more years till 2027. Okay. But Macron is like, oh my gosh, I am losing so much popularity and power in France. We'll just vote now and see if I have any support left among the French people. Conservative lawmakers were threatening to topple his government, his regime. He's trying probably to jolt the country into a sudden election and to present voters with a stark choice between continuing to support Macron, at least in the French government, if not in the European Union, or a far right government. So it's a very shocking move on his part, trying to diagnose, I think, before his opposition can really organize itself around its victory with the EU and take over France. But we'll see what the outcome is.
Gearing up for the Summer Olympics. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, and Le Pen was the one who challenged Macron last election. It's the second most popular party in France, but truly a drubbing. And I think it's funny you mentioned, and I want to hear more from Josh, who I think you kind of have like a low-key hobby of following parliamentary politics, which is fun. But it's funny to hear anti-immigrant, far right. Like if you go Google this, you're going to see that everywhere. But if you go to the actual party itself, the National Rally Party, their arguments are that jobs are stagnant, housing's unaffordable, universities are overcrowded, crime is up, humongous. 320,000 illegal immigrants entered the EU over the past year alone. That's the most since 2016. So there's legitimate concerns, very baseline human needs type concerns, like can I get a job? Can I afford food? Can I afford where I'm living? Can I get an education? None of those things are really present right now. And an interesting tidbit as well is that they dubbed the previous election the Green Wave in 2019. The Green Party picked up many seats, huge. It was the supposed youth movement. We're going to care about the climate. And then, predictably what happened, everything became more expensive. The country became more dangerous. Priorities seemed misaligned. So this seems like kind of a we want something different. Such a strong, we want something different from the French people. And they're choosing the National Rally Party here.
Yeah, and I like what Anthony Esolen wrote. He said, people are united only by what transcends them. Everything else is Elmer's glue. It's supposed to bind, but it doesn't. The question is, what makes you one? Western nations were founded upon one or another form of the Christian faith. And he goes, I am not here talking about constitutions. A constitution may be good or bad, but it alone does not unite. Ours in America was a good constitution, he said, but because of the mercurial readings by the Supreme Court, it's basically in shreds. So again, that's what we're getting at. Fundamental questions of what it means to be a country. What does it mean to be a civilization? And Europe is going through that right now. And, the left is like, well, what kind of economic questions can we present to them to try to sway people away from these, so-called right-wing parties? And it's like, it's not smart ideas. These people are concerned with family, tradition, faith, and patrimony. These are the ties that bind. That's what make people a people. And so when you reject that, all you're left with is a food fight, and scrabbling for power. So I think this is a wake-up call. Now, a lot of times the elections, in Europe they somewhat influence what happens in our own country. So if you'll remember, that England rejected Brexit, and then shortly after that, America elects Donald Trump. And then Donald Trump suffered a pretty big setback, in his midterms, although we did all right in the Senate. But then what happens a year later? The Green Party sweep in the EU, as you say, made a big, not sweep, but they won a ton.
Yeah,
And
big
so
coalitions.
now we have the populist groups, in making, and not just in France, although that was the most marketable one, but in Italy and Spain and Belgium, as you say. So I
Luxembourg.
think it looks like what's going to happen is Trump looks like he's positioned well to retake the White House, and you have Nigel Farage who's making a big run at it, and now he's going to run for the UK Parliament, and the Tories are going to be torched, I think, and the new Populist Party, the Reform Party in the UK, is going to do really well. So it's an exciting time.
And the question I kept asking too is what's the rationale for calling a snap election from Macron's perspective? Because he potentially faces a cohabitation situation where they elect another prime minister to serve alongside him, obviously hampering his ability to do what he wants. And I think it actually goes to what you're talking about there, Josh. Basically, if they put this party in power, like populists in power, nationalists in power, that they could govern long enough to the point where their problems still persist, and then the finger gets pointed at them now as like, look, they've been in power, they didn't do anything. So that could potentially preserve some of his power. Any way you put it, not a great look. I mean, I think his popularity is at like 21% was the latest poll.
Yeah,
What he-
lower
what he
than
did
Biden.
What he did
Well,
with
it's not
retirement
good to
age.
compare it against Biden anyway, though, because we have a two-party
Yeah.
system. So, but the thing is, with Macron, like he doesn't have a ruling, his party alone doesn't have an outright majority, so he has a coalition government anyway, and so he has to work with socialists or sometimes the right wingers to get anything accomplished anyway. And so if he tries to hold on to power when his own party is being just decimated in the EU elections, then he runs the risk of when the actual election comes around of being totally drubbed.
Right.
And you need to make these kind of changes and corrections sooner. That's what the Tories are finding out in England right now, that they didn't make these corrections, and so a new party is going to come in their wake and eat them out. And so what Macron's realizing is, if I call a snap election, as Erica said, she's right. Like the right wing parties might not have enough of a chance to figure out a policy and a campaign. So he might end up still having some sort of centrist coalition that can hold the right wing at bay. They have an interesting parliamentary system. It's different than England. In France, it's like there's still an election for president, and there's the top two candidates. And so he figures if he goes up against the right winger like he did in 2019, he still might prevail. So we'll see.
Yeah, and before we get more into American implications, hey, Josh or Erica, will U.S. political parties look at these results and make some changes to their platforms? Shout out to Chris. I don't know about if they will, but we've gained a lot of listeners since I think the last time we talked about this. Josh, you're typically not in favor of anything other than a two-party system, and Erica, you're a little bit more open to the idea. Why do you guys share those sentiments?
Well, I mean, first, I actually find parliamentary systems to be fascinating, and I'm not necessarily against them, but just like the Electoral College, a two-party system has a lot more merit than people give it credit for. Political parties, two-party system still make a lot of changes. I mean, the Republican Party of today is just obviously so much different than the George Bush neocon pro-war, pro-business party of 2002. I mean, it's drastically different, and I love ripping on that party because George W. Bush in 2004,
Really?
promised to fight for marriage. He ended up only caring about going to war. So, it's again, what happens is political parties, sometimes they make these adaptations and they change. So like the Democratic Party is becoming more anti-Israel than it ever was before because they're trying to win the youth vote. They're trying to win Islamic vote in places like Michigan. And so they make these changes sometimes freely. Okay. Now the Republican Party is making these changes over the starting in 2016. It wasn't actually, necessarily a beautiful thing. It was kind of ugly. It's a total food fight, and there's a lot of opposition, obviously, to Trump. And so now the party, after a few election cycles, has made peace and said, no, actually, we're going to be the Worker Party, we're going to be the party that's dedicated to more of these populist ideas, and we're going to be, not as interventionist and pro-war abroad. So I think, these elections in the EU are only going to be an accelerant towards everything that's happening here in the Republican Party at home.
Yeah, I would say as far as its impact on the Democratic Party, though, I doubt that it will have much influence on them. I don't see the Democratic National Party writ large as, seeing this as a sign that maybe we should tone it down a little bit on our woke ideology. Not at all. They're so entrenched in this.
Okay. Well, allow me to offer at least one little small
Please.
caveat to that.
All right, go ahead. What are they going to do?
Even before these weekend elections, a few days ago in New Zealand, the ruling parties gave up on a lot of this whack job far left environmental policy and said, let's turn back on the fossil fuel plants.
Yeah,
let's get some energy going.
That.
And so there's that, and then the Green parties got drubbed in Europe because these Green parties are the ones that are basically trying to save farmers that can't have any cows that fart, and you got to all starve. And so I do feel like what's going to happen is these countries in Europe are going to be like, these green policies are like toxic, politically toxic.
Yeah.
And if there's one part of the coalition we can jettison, it'll be this. And they'll still say, oh, no, we love it, we support it. But they'll like kind of slow the roll on it. And I think the Democratic Party stateside are like, well, we'll never get rid of abortion anytime in the next 15, 20 years. Yeah, but if there's one thing in their coalition that they could kind of like walk away from, it might be some of this more egregious far left economic policies. So on the environment. So we'll see. Maybe they'll throw Greta Thunberg into the ocean and tell her we don't want to hear from you again.
Yeah, I think for perspective, Europe is, I don't know, maybe like 10, 15 years more advanced than the green energy policies that we've kind of implanted in America. Their energy costs are astronomical compared to what we see. So it's almost hard to really understand true perspective from living there, but what that's done to the cost of living for the average, Frenchman or the average German is pretty shocking. I almost wish I could go grab some figures, but to the point where they would completely replace leadership at this point.
Yeah.
And abandon the 2019 green
because in the
wave.
United States, we only do that in places like California and New York to start with. And now other states like my own state of Michigan are starting to do these kind of whack job environmental policies. But in France, in Italy, in Europe, they do it nationwide. And thankfully, because we have a filibuster in the Senate, we have been able to put the brakes on that.
Yeah, I think for me, like the most hopeful thing coming out of the European election is that once reality starts to smack you in the face, the people really do they're going to get rid of these leaders and these policies. And we saw this in Italy with Giorgia Meloni, who she won a couple of years ago in Italy. We covered it on the show, and it was really exciting because Italy elected a populist woman who's very pro-family, pro-Catholic, anti-LGBT, all of these things on the social front, but also on the economic front. Giorgia Meloni has enacted populist policies, and she's rejected much of the EU's agenda for her country. And she won re-election resoundingly in Italy over the weekend. And that is a great sign that when
her party did well, right?
Her party did well. I'm sorry. Her party did well over the weekend.
The Brothers of Italy, another
the Brothers of Italy. Awesome.
Sweet name.
Love the names.
I just love how the left-wing press in the United States likes her so much because she's a woman, because that's what matters to them. So.
She checked off the box, right? Darn it. She's not that kind of woman.
Never mind. Never mind. Yeah.
It's so interesting. If you do a Google search, though, on how people are covering these European elections, it's democracy's been shaken, far right, racist, bigot, climate hoax. It's like all the words that are attached as smears kind of are hilarious to me. Chief among them, nationalist.
Yeah.
I don't know when angry populist Tom's going to come out here. When did nationalist become a dirty word? I thought we were all nationalists. And it speaks to what you're talking about with Anthony Esselin of like, I believe America is not just a Walmart parking lot that economists can let people run through for whatever economic reason we should. No, like America's a place with cultures and traditions that has a border, that has a people, and a people that need to be put first. And so people in France are saying, hey, I'm French. I'd like France to be put first. And that's a crazy idea. And that's so, I guess, threatening, disgusting to national media or global media.
Well,
to the point where it would ruin democracy. I'm
And
so
they
confused.
portray these things in such false terms. I mean, like, you know, we always say, "Hey, America should be first," and like, "How dare you be so selfish
Yeah.
and evil? Don't you care about other countries?" And it's like, okay, so if I understand your position, it's America last. You know, let's worry about Ukraine, let's worry about Gaza, but our own country, screw you, screw you. We don't care. It's like, what? I'm not saying we can't help out other people from time to time. Okay, we do that, and we're generous with our aid. But this idea that we should adopt a policy of America last is foolish.
Right.
There's this really, someone posted this over the weekend, a video clip from the late Justice Scalia talking about the need for every nation to have a common culture. It's a really cool clip, and he goes, and he's a proud Italian. He was the first Italian American elected to the, appointed to the Supreme Court. And he said he visited England, and he said, I felt so at home. It felt so much like America. I understood that America is, Anglo-Saxon English culture, and he loved it. I'm like, it was just kind of like this proud moment, it was this very proud Italian.
Mean, I feel like I can make the argument as well that nationalism's in the best interest of every country, because you come to the table bargaining on behalf of your country and your people and your culture, as opposed to this like it just feels like globalized socialism, basically, if we were to create this big global government in which everyone is kind of under the thumb of. I feel like there's actually really good incentives for countries' leaders to come to the table negotiating on behalf of the country. I'm not saying you can't cooperate in the same way that I see businesses do that, which is best for the people.
Right. Well, I mean, I think the globalist agenda is the European Union up until this election, hopefully. The European Union has been an experiment in globalist control, because you have this massive sort of uber government, uber alles, all the countries of Europe. And it started to take a real toll, like Josh said, on individual citizens, on their ability to heat their homes, to get work, to even walk safely. Look at the crime rates.
Crime rates are shocking.
The crime rates in France have been shocking. The number of stabbings carried out, the jihad that's actually, I mean, we saw it in front of the White House today. We'll get into that, or this weekend. We'll see that in a minute. But this shocking spike in violence. And I think the European Union is starting to fall apart as this globalist microcosm, that they've tried to put these impossible ambitions in front of themselves. And it's starting to fall apart, because you can't have an aggressive welfare state that welcomes everyone in the world with complete open borders, not only among the countries of the EU, but also with every other country that wants to sail across the Mediterranean. So you can't have a welfare state that supports that kind of lack of immigration policy. You can't have investments in new technologies, innovations, and all at the same time having this aggressive Green Deal where you're going to like save the planet. Like it just doesn't happen, and it falls apart. And then people are like, goodbye. Hopefully that's what we're seeing.
They spent the last 30 years telling them, you're not Italians anymore, you're not Germans anymore, you're not French anymore.
You're European.
You're citizens of the world, and this is a great, wonderful European Union. So then they have no real ability to say, maybe we shouldn't have millions of, Turkish and Middle Eastern immigrants just pouring into this country illegally, into our countries. And that sounds like a mistake, but there's no ability. They've broken down and cast aspersions on any sort of national pride. So what do you expect?
Right. And I think, too, we talk a lot about the cost of COVID here. The cost of COVID in Europe was also very high, except for a few choice countries, which we could say. But rising prices, bankruptcy, unemployment, the same issues were happening there. And a lot of the COVID policies there were by the European Union. And it was just cracking down on all these little countries that were suffering, not to mention the debt issues that Germany's been footing the bill for. So it's been falling apart for many years. And this is the chickens came home to roost a little bit over the weekend. We'll see what goes next.
Yeah, so we have our own chickens roosting in America. So if we want to transition now to
that was a great transition.
Look, I do
the chickens roosting. This is awesome. Good segue.
The chicken roost party, like we need to come up with better names for parties after seeing what's going on in Europe. But so we had some pretty large scale protests in front of the White House, and it reminds me of the CNN mostly peaceful protests. Weren't super peaceful. Some notable examples were burning American flags, holding up bloody masks of Joe Biden, defacing statues.
Yes, our president. I mean, that's just unacceptable.
Yeah, sorry, the president of the United States. Correct. Thanks for the reminder on that one. It looks like she took something out of what was that really nasty comedian did that and was like, oh, why are people mad about this? It was like a bloody Trump head. You remember what I'm talking? Kathy Griffin.
Kathy Griffin.
Oh, right.
Yeah, Kathy Griffin playbook. But anyway, so we have like the Rochambeau statue getting Free Gaza painted on it. Much worse slogans that I can't even really say out loud. Angry. And it looked like people really were not prepared for this. You didn't see a ton of police ready. I think they were actually commanded specifically to not have riot gear. They were harassing one of the state troopers standing in front of the thing. So just a really nasty, there's a long red line around the entire White House. Thousands of protesters showed up. Crazy.
Yeah.
Really crazy stuff.
I mean, if you're not going to protect the statue, move it. And what you should do is send a bunch of cops down with batons and beat them down a little bit before you throw them in the paddy wagon.
Yeah,
so that
there's
these people
one.
actually experience a little pain.
Yeah, there's one video that was really chilling to me. It was like 4 police guys, and all they had on were these small bulletproof vests. They're trying to arrest one of the protesters who had, done something egregious. And they're actually surrounded by this mob of the protesters just yelling at them, like, get out. I can't repeat it. It's family show here. But they're yelling at them. The police actually have to let go of the suspect. And basically you see them like beelining it for the periphery because it's clearly that they are in physical danger. There's another video of a police officer. He's standing in front of the statue that has been defaced already. So I don't know, horses are out of the barn, but they're throwing things at him. They're throwing plastic water bottles and like hats at him. I mean, thank God it wasn't a Stanley Cup. It would have been given a concussion. But this was the police who were sent in there they had no backup.
It's an optics
out of
problem.
control.
The reason they didn't send them in properly prepared is it was intentional. They gave them orders not to be wearing riot gear, not to bring in batons.
Yeah, that's the rules of engagement.
Problem. Right, exactly. It's a political problem for Joe Biden to have some type of confrontation here in places like Michigan. Politically, it's a no-win for him. But if you juxtapose this with, so I saw this going on, and of course, like it almost has become. I've become a little bit numb, unfortunately, to just complete vandalism.
To insurrections. I'm numb to insurrections.
Let's call them hate crimes against our country.
Yes.
Hate crimes against our country. And yet, so you check over to Washington, state of Washington, not Washington, D.C. I think 3 teenagers were given felony charges for running over a street pride mural. And I have a quote here from one of the people. We see that you have done this thing. People don't just go and do that without intention. You don't destroy symbols without intention behind it. They're basically being charged with a hate crime. Could see 2 years of jail time.
Yeah,
it's almost like we have crimes against blasphemy now.
We do have blasphemy law in America against the state-sponsored religion. Not only that, this one was like, this is Twilight Zone before Twilight Zone. So I don't know if any of you guys are familiar. Alexandria, like Old Town Alexandria, it's older than the country.
Love it.
You see cobblestones that Alexander Hamilton has walked on. You can go to the restaurant. So. Go ahead, Josh.
There's a restaurant called Gatsby Tavern where you can order the duck, which was the favorite meal of George Washington. It's a pretty good place. It's still there. Yeah,
so if you want to, I don't know if you can throw this up on screen, but Old Town Alexandria has painted a trans pride flag symbol on the streets in place of crosswalks, effectively forcing citizens to walk across state-sponsored gender ideology symbols. The Alexandria City Council quietly voted to permanently install them a year ago. Now, for
this
people
ain't
that
just for
understand
Pride Month, right?
Alexandria, you have to get a permit to paint your house.
Yeah.
Like you can't do anything without a permit of some kind. Rightfully so. It's older than the country. It's supposed to be upheld as a historic location. What is historic about this flag? It changes every year. I don't understand what could possibly people came up with this 10 minutes ago.
Oh my gosh. It's
and
if
you go a little bit too fast over it with your truck, you'll get thrown in jail on a felony charge.
Hate crime.
You can basically behead substitutes for the president, call death to America, and trounce all over the White House lawn, and nothing will be done to you.
Oh my gosh. I know. It's like, what goes through their minds? Why would you make these flags if they're so precious to you? Why would you make them like crosswalks that people are, it's like asking for someone to come and vandalize them or just damage them.
Now
even
that
not
is
on
one
purpose.
rationalization, is that it's intentional provocation, basically, to
Yeah.
retaliate against people, which they've done all over the country. It's happened in Florida too.
It's just amazing.
It's just crazy. Alexandria is a
lust
living
we
history.
trust.
Yeah. But it's just like, it's so pointed. And this is Alexandria, Old Town Alexandria. It's beautiful. When I was at Catholic U, we would go there on the weekends and walk around.
That's the best.
It's beautiful. It's a living history museum. And like you said, Tom, you have to get permission to do anything. Like if you're a store owner there and you want to change the color of the awnings that you hang out over in the summer, like you have to get permission from the city council, from the historical society, because everything has to match. And then these go down on the road. And it's just, this is exactly what the left wants to do. They're like, here's a town that represents the founding of our nation. Every major founding father went through here. We have George Washington's duck on the menu. Thank you, Josh, for that little tidbit. Let's paint the most progressive sign of tearing all this down everywhere so that you have to walk across it in obeisance just to get across the road and avoid a jaywalking violation. It's utterly maddening. And I can't wait till the good people of Virginia vote these guys out. Come on, Virginia.
It kind of cracks me up too, because I made a video on Paulette Harlow. She's a 75-year-old woman. She was just sentenced to 2 years in jail by the Department of Justice.
And the judge mocked her as her husband pleaded for her life. Yeah, that's just,
right. For sitting in the lobby of an abortion facility. And someone was like, thought they had a big gotcha comment. And I saw a couple of these like, well, she violated the FACE Act. And the FACE Act means that if you block an entrance, she conspired against their rights to yada, yada, yada. And they went over the whole legal definition. And I'm like, I think you might be missing the point. Like, we need a special federal carve out to go after 75-year-old women sitting in the lobby of an abortion facility when that law itself also applies to churches. And yet no one was prosecuted. I mean, maybe one person was prosecuted under the FACE Act for vandalizing a church, for standing in the way, for blocking anything. The point is that the government is going after their enemies aggressively through complete overreach of government, and then letting their friends or people they need to impress go away completely free. I mean, this is the greatest example. You go over to DC. Oh, I almost forgot about BLM, like the BLM riots, all the things that they literally burned down a courthouse in Portland. None of those people are in jail under federal charges. All the people that we were supposed to charge with the FACE Act, Merrick Garland said, oh, we couldn't find them. They did it at night. So it was easier to find the scooter people, I guess. Like, it's such obvious examples. And this is why I always, it's like when people get into the logistics or like the details with me, like you're missing the point. Like, we've just basically internalized complete overreach of the government to infringe upon their enemies' lives at this point. And that's why I think normal people are looking at this Trump verdict as well and are like, something's going on here I don't like at all.
You're right. And it's I think what it gets down to is that people are, more and more Americans are waking up to the fact that the Democratic Party stands for reward our friends and punish our enemies. Not that we have a common sense of tradition, not that we have a rule of law where everyone's treated equally, and we just peacefully try to figure out what's the best policy. They are now committed to rewarding their friends and punishing their enemies. And if that's the ball game, then they need to taste their own medicine.
What's that famous quote, Erica? You might know. It's for my friends, everything; for my enemies, the law.
Yeah. Yep. That's pretty much it. You got it. But I think that it's making the choice that we have in November even more stark, right? For people who are still like, I don't know about Trump. Like, I'm having a little moral pleading issue here because he's just, he's an adulterer. And again, not overlooking Trump's shortcomings as a man, but you have to look at the choice that we have between 4 more years of Joe Biden and 4 more years of this weaponization of the government. These attacks on free speech would be another major issue. This 2-tier justice system that we're seeing, these crosswalks in Alexandria. This is what we get for 4 more years. And if they win by even, 1%, if they win by a smidgen, you know what they're going to do. The Biden administration will be like, oh, we have a mandate. The American people have spoken. They want more of this. And we're just going to get more. They won by this much
in Arizona and Wisconsin, and Georgia last time.
And they're going to be like, the people have spoken. The people want more of this. And we absolutely cannot take 4 more years of this.
Also, on the Pride sidewalk thing, is it kind of a trap too? Because if you don't walk on it, you're a bigot. if you walk on it a little bit too hard, you have committed hate crime. Like, what's there's no win. I don't. Why
Unless
would you
you're
put
in
it
the
on the
know.
road?
Yep. Come on,
So,
Tom. You
yeah.
got to learn how to walk right
I
under
guess
the
so.
Bidens.
Speed walking. So yeah, before we get into the Twilight Zone here, we had a really interesting poll. I know Joshua fired up on it. So Pew Research Center did a poll on Trump voters and Biden voters, and one of the sections was about gender, family, reproductive issues, and the 2024 election. All very hot button stuff here. But one element of this poll, and Simon, I think we can bring it up, is Trump supporters far more likely than Biden supporters to say society should prioritize marriage and having children. And if you look at the split here, eye-popping split here, percentage of registered voters who say society is better off if people make marriage and having children a priority. Trump supporters, 59%. Biden supporters, 19%.
19.
That's crazy.
Less than
that is
1
crazy.
in 5 Biden voters. This is why we have made overtures to the Trump campaign and said, you should bring up, this is before we found out about this poll. We said, you should talk more about the need for policies that can help encourage marriage and kids. You know, what can you do to make it so that because right now with all this inflation and the price of housing soaring, there's a lot of young people who want to start a family and start having kids, but they feel like they're priced out right now, and Biden isn't doing anything for them except student loans, which is not nothing. I get it, but like what they really need are jobs that can pay well, and they need houses that are affordable. And that's why we say that Trump needs to get on top of this issue, because almost 60% of his voters understand this importance. And you want to get more voters, this is the way to do it. Talk about how policies should be set up to try to promote marriage and family and having kids. It's the issue is right there. The poll is, this is crystal clear. And the Pew Research poll is not a right-wing poll at all. So this tells us right there. And again, when we say that, we've been saying for a long time that the left just doesn't care about marriage and kids. Like, what are you talking about? Like, you just told us now. 19%. My goodness.
Doesn't this strike you as kind of a vote of confidence in the future? Like how you think the future is going to be, whether or not you'd want to bring kids into the world?
Yeah. This is literally having children means that there will be a future for the country. And so the party that is going to encourage having children, this is the pronatalist argument, right? It's going to focus on having children, the promise of a future, versus people who are like, well, the world's going to pot, or I don't like my life, so why would I bring a child into this world? It's just, again, it's a stark contrast that this is the choice facing Americans.
And those choices are so reinforcing too.
Yes.
Like people like, I don't want to have kids, it's expensive, and I'm worried about the climate change, and then they kind of reaffirm their decision not to have children, and they become even more, how this world's so horrible. Have a little faith in the future. If you think you're not a total worthless piece of dung, maybe you should have more children and make the world better.
Exactly. I like my husband. I think there should be more Todds running around the world. That's why I married him. I was like, we need more people like him. And so, we got married and had as many kids as God gave us, and it's great.
No, sorry, not on that. I was just thinking just a general question. There's got to be a certain amount of people who are just consuming the Kool-Aid of, like you said, Josh, like climate change, or it's going to be not going to be able to afford it. I'm not going to be able to do this and that. Is there really a good faith way to engage with someone to talk about the benefits of wanting to get married and have children? I feel like you could do it on a secular level, but I really do think there's a religious component to this. I'd be interested to see the breakdown on the poll of how many people you studied were Christian or religious of some kind. I just feel like a lot of the arguments come down to a religious element to me.
It's hard if you don't have some sort of religion or some sort of in Israel, people have more children there because it's because you have the Jewish faith, which is a little bit stronger there, but they also feel like they need to perpetuate the Jewish people because this is their refuge. The state of Israel is the only place, like if we get rejected by everyone else in the whole world, at least we have here,
At least we can
you
go
know,
home.
because they remember the boats being turned away in New York Harbor at, you know, when they're trying to flee Nazi Germany. So they're like, at least we have this spot, and we owe it to ourselves to have more children and to grow this nation, you know, this Jewish people. So they have a cultural identity. It's obviously wrapped up with the religion as well, but they also have that cultural thing. So I mean, it's harder when you don't have a religious reason, because then it's just like collecting more stuff and checking more things off the bucket list. And hey, let's go, you know, visit. I don't know. Let's go to Japan for a few days and visit a new country all the time. It's like, it sounds great, but like, don't you have a little bit more to live for? I mean, I just
Yeah.
boggles my mind.
I mean, Brad Wilcox, if you want a great breakdown of who's getting married and who's having children, why, and who's not, Brad Wilcox's book, Get Married, is a great start. And you can actually check out my interview with him over on Edify channel. We had a great conversation about this. And he goes right to this point that the people who are getting married and having children tend to be the not only the happiest people in the United States, but also those who have a religious background, who are educated, right? There's definitely an education, a sort of privilege that goes into being married. But yeah, talking at a secular level, and just, I think, Tom, to your question of how do you encourage people to consider this lifestyle? Yeah, we should be encouraging religious communities that can grow and can draw people into them, because they also have the mechanism of supporting young couples through those difficult early years when you have all small children. They can support couples better than the government, in terms of, like, you have a time of unemployment in the family, and church communities are a great place to be when you're going through family struggles.
Yeah,
to avoid the divorce rates.
Maybe what I meant to ask was, it's more of a spiritual question, because I think when people, they say, Josh, for example, you know, they do the Japan trips, they make all the money they were supposed to make, they buy the cars. There's like a feeling of emptiness that is pretty undeniable if you ask most people that are being sincere. And so then it goes into more of a spiritual reality of like, well, why am I here? What am I doing? Those go beyond physical reality type question. And so
Right.
I think that
ultimately they're still looking for purpose, or they're looking for meaning.
yeah,
And you see that hunger amongst people who are not religious. They're searching for that. They're trying to find some sort of meaning, and ultimately, I would think that they would find it in serving others, and that's ultimately why family formation is great, because nothing helps you understand serving others than having a family, and it just really breaks you of selfishness in a major way.
I want to give a huge shout out to anyone listening who has kids. I assume we probably have a lot of parents in the audience or grandparents. It's amazing. It's a service to society and your own family, and getting them to heaven's huge. But I think, like, there's so many things in society right now I'm thinking of that maybe a secular person is eating up, that is altering what would be kind of obvious through natural law. Like, a great example would be like abortion or birth control, or this idea that, you know, we're made for this kind of like free love exchange. I think if you lived a more natural life, then it would become obvious, like, oh, I'm drawn to a person, I'm drawn to reproduce, I'm drawn to providing for a family, building a family, having those strong ties. It makes you feel good. It makes you feel secure. It makes you fills you with purpose. And there's so many like lies that are just sold as normal, as natural, that really are not. So I don't know. I do see like trends of people, we always talk about this on like a food level. Like, you're seeing people really reject what was seen as normal, maybe like fast food or chemicals or whatever's being put in food. It's making people feel miserable. People are looking for alternatives. I feel like we're kind of getting that with the birth conversation as well. Whereas like, these hormonal birth control I've been prescribed on for my entire life make me feel terrible, like make me attracted to the wrong people, are messing me up in some way, messing with my fertility. Maybe we should reject that. Or like, maybe we shouldn't be sleeping around with all these things. Maybe contraception is leaving a hole in me. So I think those are like answers to a spiritual reality, but I think you can come to on completely natural terms. And I do see that.
The last few generations, there have been those of us, you know, Eric and I and Gen X and others and the boomers that have been trying to say, stop believing all these lies, you know, and we're just, shut up. They don't want to hear from us. But I think Gen Z, you know, the younger guys and gals out there are starting to realize, you know, this is a house of cards, and I don't buy all this stuff. Like, this is not normal. And like, what, I'm just going to live in my basement and consume porn and play video games all day. Like, isn't there more to life than this? So
Mhm.
I do feel like more and more of that generation are waking up, and it's and pushing back at all these accepted sacred cows.
I see the
which are just
seeds.
lies.
I see the seeds for
Yeah.
sure. I guess I probably run in some radical circles, probably considered by the average person. But yeah, this is like dinner table conversation now for a lot of people my age.
Mhm.
But yeah, we slide into the Twilight Zone now. Josh, you're up first. What do you have?
Well, I mean, again, just this whole, again, we're talking about some of these bigger issues, and there can be kind of doom and gloom sometimes. I mean, like, look, we are facing a difficult time in our own country. Don't get me wrong, but I always want our fellow Catholics to really have an appreciation for the hope that resides in you. That's one of my favorite verses of Scripture, 1 Peter 3:16. And so C.S. Lewis was talking about how even back in his day, there were people, oh, things are so much worse than ever before and all this stuff. And he says, well, in one way, we can think a great deal too much of the atomic bomb, because that was the scare there. At any moment, the whole world could go up, right? Your whole country could explode. I mean, it's still there, of course, but less scary, I guess, than in the immediate World War II era where he was at. He says, how are we to live in the atomic age? I am tempted to reply, why, as you would have lived in the 16th century when the plague visited London almost every year, or as you would have lived in the Viking age when raiders from Scandinavia might land and cut your throat any night. Indeed, as you are already living in an age of cancer, in an age of syphilis, in an age of paralysis, in an age of air raids, an age of railway accidents, an age of motor accidents. In other words, do not let us begin by exaggerating the novelty of our situation. Believe me, dear sir or madam, you and all who you love were already sentenced to death before the atomic bomb was invented, and quite a high percentage of us are going to die in unpleasant ways. We had indeed one very great advantage over our ancestors, aesthetics, but we have that still. It is perfectly ridiculous to go about whimpering and drawing long faces because the scientists have added one more chance of painful and premature death to a world which is already bristled with such chances, in which death itself was not a chance at all, but a certainty. If we are going to be destroyed by an atomic bomb, let that bomb, or COVID or whatever else you want to throw in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let that bomb come when it finds us doing sensible and human things. Praying, working, teaching, reading, listening to music, bathing the children, playing tennis, chatting to our friends over a pint and a game of darts, not huddled together like frightened sheep and thinking about bombs. They may break our bodies, and any microbe can do that, but they need not dominate our minds.
Yes. C.S. Lewis for the win.
C.S. Lewis story time with Josh. Sign me up.
That was
love it, dude.
awesome. That was great.
He
It's
got me
so
back into
true.
the Christian faith, so I owe him a little.
It's so
Yeah,
true.
you do him a little bit.
I was at a dinner a couple of nights ago, and someone asked me, they were like, "Oh, like how do you do it where you just read the news every day? Like, aren't you so depressed and down?" And I was like, yeah, it can get, when you're looking at all these big global issues and catastrophes, it can get a lot depressing and all that. But the way that you resist that is by going out and touching grass, right? Like living real life throughout my day. Like I nurse a baby. That's pretty fleshy and normal. And it's a gesture.
That's faith
not
in the
just a gesture.
future.
Yeah, it's faith in the future. Exactly. That I have hope that whatever ends up killing me, and something will, like 100% of us are going to die, most of us unpleasantly, as he says. You just, once you accept that and you believe that that's not the end, then it's hard to get too depressed, even in the face of things like, I don't know, trans flags on crosswalks in historic cities, because in the end, you get that proportionality that everything that the Biden administration is going to do or Macron's going to do in Europe, none of it can touch the joy that Jesus Christ has given us. And that's the spiritual winning side to be on, right? To speak to Tom.
Word.
Word
Yeah, I
to
get
your
that
mother.
question. I get that question like twice a week, probably.
Yeah. A lot.
And I think another element to this, and I think this just speaks to what we got going on at Catholic Vote and the Loopcast is it would be hard to cover the news we cover in a completely secular fashion. And I could see it being very depressing because you get this information and then it just leaves you with, well, what now?
Yeah.
And to have the confidence in the deeper answers to say it's okay, like the battle's already been won, the victory's been won. And then to Josh's point, we're going to be laughing. We're going to be doing very humane, good things for the soul, regardless of whenever we get caught. It's like we pair the two, and it's like we're going to be okay, you know? So I think that's what, when I answer that question, it's a similar combination of both of those things, but approaching the news with a Catholic background, I think, is a better proposition than just a secular doom and gloom.
Amen. Thank you,
That's
Josh.
it.
That was awesome.
Thank you for that, Josh. Erica?
Well, I decided to go with some good news as well. Here's a story you can share with your children because this is so cool. It's Knights of Columbus actually being like warrior knights. Like, this is so great. So I love this story. It was in the Loop this morning. 2 Florida Knights of Columbus flew 3 helicopter rescue missions into Haiti this past spring, and they saved almost 150 people. This was, and at first I'm like, wait, did something happen in Haiti and I missed it? Yeah, Haiti has been absolutely racked with gang violence.
Oh, you were on maternity leave.
Did you cover this?
Yeah, barbecue.
Oh,
yeah,
busted.
all good.
Okay. Well,
That's a
I'm
completely
gonna say
fine
it again.
excuse, by the way.
They
Yeah.
got the second shout out. That's okay.
Yeah.
I was having a baby. All right, we're going with the Knights. I loved it. I liked what he said to his wife. And so the wife asked him, Marinello was the guy's name. She asked this knight, why must you help these people? Why do you put yourself at risk? And he said, I told my wife, who's going to help them if I say no? I was the 13th helicopter company they called. The 12 in front of me all said no. At what point do you say yes? And I was just like, this is awesome. That is heroism.
That made Jesus smile.
That made Jesus smile. That was being a true Knight of Columbus. So I just wanted to highlight that. Sorry, you've already covered it, guys.
No, we didn't cover this specific story, just the gang violence in general. Yeah, no, sorry.
Awesome.
Go. So
I had to go back and do that. But yeah, no, this was a wonderful story. And these 2 knights, Marinello and Matos, are from Florida. They got their inspiration. They were called by the Florida Congressman Corey Mills, and he was desperately trying to find people to go in and rescue. They think there might be up to 700 Americans trapped in Haiti. Jeez. And he told the 2 men, Corey Mills said, well, these Americans who are trapped, they were serving an orphanage. They're like on a mission trip and they get trapped in this orphanage. And he goes, the first thing I thought about was Father McGivney and his care for orphans. So there's Blessed Father McGivney, buried in my home church here in New Haven, Connecticut, and still inspiring men to go and rescue the widow and the orphan. So great news. There are still good men in America, and we got to support them. So shout out to my Knights of Columbus.
Isn't Father McGivney considered one of the fathers of the American church?
No, not really.
What am I thinking of?
Yeah. You're thinking of the Carroll family?
He's a great
Lord
Catholic
Baltimore,
man.
maybe.
He is a great Catholic man. He was more like 1830s. So
okay, yeah, no, he's
later.
Later than that, I think.
Oh, sorry, 1870s. I'm sorry, 1832. My church. It was when the church was built, and he served in it in the 1870s.
I was thinking of Lord Baltimore, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know what you're thinking about, but
who knows? Really, who knows what I'm thinking at any given moment? That's a great question. I don't even know myself sometimes. Erica, are you good?
I'm good. I'm good with my story.
Okay, so mine. I have a video from the Associated Press that I'd like to play.
Video.
If we could. So a little bit of a setup here. So Biden went mega viral for, as I said in the video that I made, at best sitting in an invisible chair, at worst pooping his pants at the Normandy speech. And so the Associated Press, here's the caption. You might be seeing a clip on social media that appears to show President Biden trying to sit in a chair that isn't there. However, this video doesn't show the full context of the moment. AP breaks down the moment. If we could get a little playthrough on the fact check here.
He's seeing a clip on social media that appears to show President Biden trying to sit in a chair that isn't there. The footage is from an event commemorating the 80th anniversary of D-Day. However, This video doesn't show the full context of the moment. It is cut right before the president sits down in a chair that very much exists. Plus, his chair is clearly visible for most of the video. In extended footage of the ceremony, you can see Biden look over his shoulder for the chair, pause and bend over while the next speaker is announced, and then take a seat. Edited clips like this have followed Biden throughout his presidency to support an ongoing narrative that he is mentally incompetent. They often misrepresent an innocent moment, banking on the hope that most people won't question what they see as they scroll through their feeds. In one past example, a video was cut to make it seem as though Biden abruptly left last year's Thanksgiving turkey pardoning ceremony at the White House. In reality, he spent several minutes speaking and taking photos with guests. Election day is just 5 months away, so we'll continue fact-checking moments like this as the race heats up. You might be seeing a...
Can we fact check the fact checkers? Is that okay?
Awesome.
Oh my god.
That's what we do all the time.
Yeah.
So the Associated Press, neutral guardian of information and news in the country, looks like it's employed by the Biden administration to just run press on obvious moments of mental decline. Not only that, they went all the way back to Thanksgiving. I'm like, first off, you don't need to do fact checks on normal events.
Yeah.
So the reason that this fact check exists probably points to the fact that something unusual happened. And the thing unusual is it pretty much looked like he pooped his pants. Like, I got to be honest with you. It was completely unusual. He had to leave the ceremony early. People were talking about that, left Macron to greet the veterans. Not only that, he then the next day went to the same spot where Reagan delivered a famous address about D-Day and basically plagiarized the whole thing. I mean, almost word for word plagiarism of the speech. And then
that's kind of what he was known for, though.
Kind of his thing. And then the only part he didn't plagiarize, and I have a part from it. We have every soldier who stormed the beach, who dropped by parachute or landed by glider, every sailor who manned the thousands of ships and landing craft, every aviator who destroyed German-controlled airfields, bridges, and railroads, all were backed by other brave Americans, including hundreds of thousands of people of color and women who courageously served despite unjust limitations on what they could do for their nation.
Definitely wasn't from Reagan. Oh my goodness.
I'm like, that is the only part he did not plagiarize. That definitely was not in there in the 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And but,
guys, it's nice to know that the media doesn't have a problem with plagiarizing because, Melania, when she gave a speech that was pretty similar to Michelle Obama's, the media was totally cool with it.
Yeah, right. They let her have.
I didn't see an AP fact check on that. I don't remember very many AP fact checks on Trump things, including I don't know, the Steele dossier, the Hunter Biden laptop.
The liberal media wears the same jerseys as the Democrats.
Right. This is just obvious. I love the part where she was like, the chair that very much exists. By
Not a little bit. It very much exists. And the thing that drives me crazy, like, look, even if, and I'm sure there are people who edit Biden videos to make him look worse than it is. Sure, granted that. However, there is no denying that the man is not mentally all there. I mean, we covered the Time interview last week. You read the transcript and you're like, this guy is not all here. And that compounded with multiple long form videos with no cuts of him wandering around stages, of reading off the teleprompter, like pause, last name. He's reading the instructions instead of what the teleprompter is saying. They
tried to fact check that too.
Yeah, this is not a narrative, guys. This is real. Right. What was the other thing last week? Oh, the Wall Street Journal piece that was saying, okay, behind closed doors, Biden's starting to slip. Like, how weird is that, right? When do you have a political figure who goes out there and tries to look as incompetent as possible, and meanwhile, behind closed doors, he's secretly sharp? No, that doesn't make any sense at all.
It's like the drunken samurai defense. Did you hear about that theory?
Yes. That actually was a funny Saturday Night Live clip.
Yeah. Tell me. I don't know the drunken samurai.
Well, I was talking about in regards to how many people believe that Jar Jar Binks is actually a Sith Lord and that he was the one
I agree with that
operation, which I agree.
He's just pretending to be obnoxious. And
no.
Yes,
exactly. And the writers just basically lost the nerve to actually go through with that because they did some screen testing, and Jar Jar Binks was so unlikable that they're like, we can't do this.
I hated
him. The show.
He was actually supposed to be the Phantom Menace. He was the evil Sith Lord.
I'm actually glad Josh is on. Josh and I are on the same page.
100% on that. I mean, if they would have stuck with it, I would have been like, I would have been like, oh my gosh, that was so worth it. I hated him so bad. But they chickened out. That was so terrible.
And like,
But actually,
they were saying he employed the drunken samurai defense by like, he would just destroy things by looking like he was doing, like he was moving in an uncoordinated manner, but he actually was very coordinated as the drunken samurai defense. Sorry, Josh.
it is super cool. You should watch a YouTube video on it.
It was great.
It's like Darth Jar Jar Binks or whatever. Go to
right,
YouTube.
check it out.
It is 12 minutes. You'll be blown out of the water. It's awesome.
Yep.
I'm excited.
No, actually, Saturday Night Live did a funny skit about this with Reagan. Because Reagan had the same thing where everyone was talking about his decline in '87 or so. And Saturday Night Live did this skit where he's like, "Oh, okay, all right." It sounds like he's kind of an idiot and dumbling. And then here's the Girl Scout. "Okay, hi. And what's your name?" "Okay, Mary." And then she leaves and goes, "Okay, now let's go." He brings him this guy. "I want this guy in the car. We got to turn this on." And he picks up the phone. He answers it like a German, talking to Zurich. It was so funny. It was good humor. And if they try to do that for Biden, it actually would be hilarious. If he's not like a Roomba behind stage where he's like,
Well, that's what the Democrats are trying to tell us. They're like, behind stage, he is like on
I've seen some of
fire.
the best memes ever though about like,
I
it was
don't
like
believe you.
Biden behind closed doors, and it was like a speed run of Super Mario Bros. With like a billion like obstacles in the way. He's like jumping around super fast.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
I don't believe you, AP. I'm going to end on that. I'd appreciate if you stop they basically work for the Biden administration at this point. But that does it for this episode. Thank you guys all for joining in the live chat, all of you that's stuck around. If you guys want to help us out, YouTube, subscribe, like there, send us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I appreciate those. If you want to email me, loopcast@catholicvote.org. If you want to grab the book for God, Country, and
Oh, yeah.
Sanity, you can see it on all of our shelves here. Tom McCluskey had like 8 of them on his shelf on the Friday show.
Yes,
you can grab
Tom.
that. Catholic Vote website. We'll leave a link in the description. We have 2 very prominent authors on this podcast featured in this book. And as always, the best thing you can do for us is pray for us. We're praying for you. St. Thomas More, Our Lady of Guadalupe, and St. Fidelis, pray for us. And we will see you guys on the next show. Have a great Monday. Peace.